Speaking of Rachel Shabi, she has been on Cross Question this evening and has been discussing Keir Starmer's continued failure to actually oppose the ongoing war crimes that are currently being committed by the State of Israel, and his prevaricating and his flip-flopping and his changing of his position in what is clearly a tactical electoral positioning move, rather than indeed a certain level of moral positioning that he has internally, a sincere ethical position that he might have taken. So let's have a watch. I have not watched this yet, so it'll be my first time reaction. Let's see what she has to say.
Hi. How can Keir Starmer provide a nuanced approach to the Israel-Hamas conflict without losing one side or the other?
We've been talking about this over the last hour on the programme, in that he's had a meeting today with Muslim Labour MPs in the light of 150 Muslim Labour councillors resigning over his comments on the siege of Gaza. Ali Milani, as chair of the Labour Muslim Network, I imagine you have a view on this.
I do. I just want to say, first of all, 150 haven't resigned. They've written a letter. And
I thought they'd actually resigned from the party.
Now it's 250 councillors who have written a letter to Sir Keir Starmer asking for the party to adopt a position of an immediate ceasefire, which is...
It's around about 27, 28 councillors that have actually resigned now, but there's 250 that's written the letter. That is true. Ali Milani is right about that.
Not only we know the British population agrees with, according to YouGov polls, but also we've heard it from everyone from the UN all the way to the Archbishop of Canterbury. I think this is a really, really good question, and the large parts is I'm really getting sick as someone who's Muslim and has received death threats in the last sort of 2 weeks as this issue has gone on, that we don't allow hate to take over our city, our communities, and we deal with what is a very, very difficult crisis, respectfully, openly, and morally. And I think the way to do that is to approach the issue honestly and with humanitarian law and international law in mind. I think the way that Sir Keir Starmer can do that is by acknowledging the call from Muslim community members today that an immediate ceasefire is the position that the party should now take, in line with human rights organisations, the UN, and the British public.
But he clearly doesn't believe that.
Well, I'm hoping he changes his mind. Look, the reality is we now have 200 hostages. We think around 200 hostages, which should be released. We've had 1,400 Israelis lose their lives tragically in a heinous terror attack. We also now have 1,000 Palestinian children who have died under rubble, nearly 6,000 Palestinian citizens who are dead now. And they bear no responsibility for what has happened over the last 2 weeks, and they bear no responsibility and have no power in what happens over the next 2 weeks. And so the release of the hostages is absolutely the right call. So is an immediate ceasefire.
Should that not be a precondition for a ceasefire, though? If the Israelis said, look, you release the hostages, we will have a ceasefire, surely...
This is such a stupid position to take, right? Like, I get why Ian is saying this. I understand, like, the rationale that goes into this. But let's just examine this critically for a couple of minutes, right? So you say, right, to try and get the hostages free, so we can use our bargaining chip of we'll stop bombing you if we get our hostages back, right? The condition of this is that Hamas care about whether or not the citizens of Palestine die or not. They've clearly already taken this position. They already do not care if the citizens of Gaza die or not. They clearly don't care, hence why they're happy to continue to quote-unquote use them as human shields, according to the IDF, according to, I'm assuming, Ian, based upon this position that he's taken here, and according to the ideology they believe in. They've already said, right? I've seen Hamas officials when being interviewed. I think the specific interview was with Mark Lamont Hill on Al Jazeera, saying that why should they care? What's worth it? Is it worth it to live in the continual position of occupation? Is it worth it to live where we have little human rights? Is it worth it to live in this position where we've been continually blockaded and occupied and oppressed by the State of Israel? Or should we try and die fighting for freedom? And that ideology is how they also feel about their own citizens as well. They call the people who die in this conflict martyrs, for example. So given what we already know about the military tactics of the Al-Qassam Brigade, do you really think that Hamas themselves, the actual militants, the Qassam brigades themselves, do you think that they would suddenly, having already, according to you, used loads of their own citizens as human shields, would then go, oh, how are you killing all of these civilians? Well, okay, we'll have to give the hostages free, otherwise all these civilians will die. Well, they've already clearly shown you that they don't care about the civilians dying or not to this point already. They've clearly shown that their desire to have military conflict with Israel is more important to them than whether or not civilians on their own side die, because they've taken the position that those lives are worth less or are worth sacrificing in pursuit of Palestinian liberation. That's their position that they've taken. So the idea that you can hold the citizens of Gaza and their lives as a bargaining chip to get the hostages back makes no sense. This makes no sense whatsoever. This is an untenable position for you to take. Because you go, well, if you don't release hostages, we'll keep bombing you. They'll go, yeah, fine. Bomb the hostages. What do we care? They'll say, fine. Bomb our population. We don't care. They're martyrs now in the struggle for Palestinian liberation. Please release the hostages that you have in Israeli jails right now. And that is our condition. Because you need to have a condition that the other side cares about, which clearly Hamas have demonstrated, according to their logic, they don't care about. And Yoav Gallant, when he said that they're happy to cut off everything unless the hostages are freed, he knows this too. Won't Israel attacking Palestine not run the risk of killing the hostages? They already have. I think it's 22 hostages have already been killed by Israeli airstrikes.
That would seem to be most people to be equitable.
I don't know. Perhaps I don't know what the negotiations are taking place. It's difficult because we're so far removed from it. But the two things are absolutely linked. But the reality is, I mean, look. One of the biggest concerns that exist right now from a human perspective, even if you take the Muslim or Christian or any faith or none out of it, there are hospitals in Gaza right now where there are children in incubators that have hours until that incubator switches off, right? That child isn't a hostage negotiator, nor do they have hostages. Turning off that incubator is a war crime. First of all, the denial of water, power, and essential supplies into Gaza, the cutting off and collective punishment is a war crime. But it's also wrong. And I think all communities can rally behind that it's wrong for that child to have to suffer and die.
But Hamas could immediately solve that by releasing the hostages.
But that child bears no responsibility to that, Ian. That child can't go talk to Hamas and say, release the hostages. We're a democracy and we believe in international law and we believe in humanitarian...
And again, Hamas don't care. They've already shown that they don't care, right? They've already shown that they believe that Palestinian liberation is more important than those lives. So it's not a bargaining chip that you can use against them.
I'll give you an example. It's like, imagine someone in London or a group had committed the most heinous act on London. Nobody in their right mind would suggest starving London of food, of water, of cutting off its power supply, of allowing children to die in hospitals who bear no responsibility. They're not Hamas, and they bear no responsibility to that. That's a moral position. It's easy.
They don't. But
we don't have to be Palestinian.
But you're putting all of the moral responsibility on Israel here when it was Hamas who launched the terror attack in the first place and have got these hostages. And all they would have to do, at least to show a sign of goodwill, if nothing else, would be to release the hostages. And then I think there would be a huge pressure on the Israeli government to have a ceasefire.
Obviously, I'm not Hamas.
I know, and I certainly wasn't implying that you.
I mean, if it was me, I would release the hostages. But what I'm saying is, it's not me, and it's not any of us. We're a liberal democracy. We believe in international law and humanitarian law, right? We believe in the.
Well, I think they've released 4 hostages so far. Like Enkife in chat points out that I think Hamas did offer a ceasefire in exchange for some hostages, which Israel ignored. But if someone has a link to that'd be great.
Value in the humanity of those hostages' lives, but we also believe in the value and humanity of all those innocent people. 6,000 dead under rubble, 1 in 20 buildings now flattened. Who can get, who of any moral standing cannot call that out, not only as a war crime, but the wrong thing to do?
Rachel Shabi, you and I used to be on a panel on a programme called CNN Talk, and I can remember talking about Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism.
Don't call her shabby, Ian. I think she scrubs up pretty well.
A lot on that programme at the time. Do you think that Keir Starmer's views on this are almost subliminally being guided by the need to rescue the Labour Party's reputation, which, to be fair, over the last 3 years he's done on this issue, but now it seems to be in jeopardy again?
I really would hope that he isn't doing that, because those two are completely separate things, and actually conflating those two things makes things worse, both in terms of his position on Israel-Gaza, which has been horrendous, and in terms of anti-Semitism, which would absolutely be worsened by him being subliminally guided by that, as you suggest. I think I don't know what he's being guided by, but what I know is definitely the case is that he has no moral backbone right now. And the people who he's listening to do not know what they're talking about. This is a really low bar. It really is. All we are saying is, can you just ask Israel to comply with humanitarian law and international law? And we're asking this of a guy who's a human rights lawyer.
be fair, right? To be fair, he has said they should act within international law, right? He said that on multiple occasions. The problem is that is not good enough. It's not good enough just to say they need to comply with international law, because they're not doing that. They're committing war crimes right now. They're breaking international law right now, continually, and they have done for 70 years, right? They've continually broken international law on multiple different occasions throughout the entirety of the occupation up until now. And they were very happy to criticise it. Emily Thornberry was at the dispatch box criticising their breaking of international law in 2019, back when the Jam Man himself was leader of the party, back when we didn't have this neo-McCarthyism going on about Labour Party politicians' opinions about the state of Israel. They're very happy to not doing that now, though, are they? Not at all. And whilst those war crimes go on, you continue to say, well, please act by humanitarian law. That means nothing. It means nothing unless you actually critique the actual actions that are happening, right? You can't just stand by a murderer as they commit one and say, this person needs to act within the law, this person needs to act within the law. No, you need to take actions. You need to be actionable in actually trying to stop these people from engaging in these actions. Try and stop the person doing the murder. Try and stop the state who is committing violations of international law, who is committing war crimes at that moment. You have to do that, otherwise you're being completely ineffectual.
For crying out loud. If he cannot tell the difference, if he cannot summon the will right now to say, my understanding of human rights law and the basic rules of engagement is that you do not respond to a war crime with another war crime. And by the way, that answers the question you asked Ali. You do not starve people of water and fuel and food, commit a war crime, because a war crime has been committed against you. That is the basics of the engagement of the rule of law when it comes to war. And that's why that's not happening. And that's why that's a war crime for Israel to do that. And for Keir Starmer to not be able to say very clearly, that is a breach of humanitarian law. You have to call for a ceasefire, which, by the way, there's overwhelming majority British support for. You have to lift the siege on Gaza so humanitarian aid can go in. These are very basic things.
Do you think Egypt is committing a war crime because they've effectively part of the siege on Gaza, aren't they?
Well, Egypt cannot. It's not able to decide whether Rafah is open or closed unless Israel says so. I mean, that's how that situation works.
Well, how does that work? Because it's the border with Egypt.
That's literally how the agreement with Israel works. Seriously, they are not able. Look, if Egypt was able to decide to open Rafah, do you not think that for the last 2 weeks, that long queue of lorries with humanitarian aid that was trying to get into Gaza, do you not think that would have gone in by now?
I think
And also, Solly in chat is right as well. Like, Egypt is not a party engaging in the conflict right now. They are a neutral country in this conflict. You can't commit a war crime if you're not involved in the conflict in the first place, right? They may be in breach of international law, though. I'm not sure. I'm not a human rights lawyer. I'm no director of public prosecutions like Sir Keir Starmer was. So I can't tell you whether Israel's not opening of the Rafah crossing is against international law. I also can't tell you whether or not Rachel Shabi is right about whether or not that border crossing can only be opened by Egypt upon given credence to by Israel. I can't tell you that either, but I'm just going to assume Shabi is correct because she is excellent.
Reason that Egypt has closed its border is because it doesn't want hundreds of thousands of refugees crossing into Egypt from Gaza. That's presumably why they closed it.
Come on, you could open a border to let lorries in and not let people out. I mean, this is basic stuff. Come on, Ian. The reason it doesn't want Gazans to go through Rafah to Egypt is because it fears that Israel will not let those Palestinians back into Gaza. It fears that there is a giant ethnic cleansing plan going on here, and rightly.
What a pity Egypt didn't want to take Gaza as a territory when it was offered it, but way back when. Well, we wouldn't have this situation for a start, would we?
No.
True, yeah. Why didn't the Arabs just have a state together, right? Egyptian Arabs, Palestinian Arabs, it's all the same, isn't it? It's all just the same, right? They could just be able to grab that territory, right? The people who actually live in Palestine, they shouldn't have a say. Jesus Christ, Ian, this face that Rachel is pulling here it's the correct reaction to this statement, right? Just mix all the Arabs together, it's fine. Jesus.
Let's not let's not impose weird scenarios. The reason we
It's not
have
a weird scenario. It
reason,
happened.
The reason we have this situation is because we have an unequal. This is not like an equal battle between Palestinians and Israel. We have a situation where for over 50 years now, Palestinians have been under military occupation. And
fuck it. Just let Russia annex Luhansk and Donetsk. It's all white people at the end of the day, right?
It's brutal. It is brutal every single day.
Okay,
right?
well,
and that has got nothing to do with Egypt.
Because
That's got nothing to do with Egypt.
We can't go back to the history, through the whole history of the Palestinian situation.
Maybe you should, Ian.
Well, we have done many times over the last couple of weeks, I can assure you. Stuart Jackson.
I find it very, very difficult to believe that Ian Dale has presented some kind of fair and balanced and wholesale critique of the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. I find that very difficult to believe, chat.
Well, I don't agree with the history, but I won't go. I mean, Egypt attacked Israel in 1967, and so Gaza has been a contested territory. Israel unilaterally left Gaza and left a functioning economy, utilities, infrastructure, education, hospitals. It was Hamas who decided to murder their opponent and have a totalitarian jihadist regime there, and is an existential threat to the people of Israel. And let's not repeat in this canard that Israel is breaking
Source? Press X to doubt?
International law. The very eminent barrister Lord Vedarami last night demolished that argument in the debate in the Lords. He's an international law specialist. Israel is not breaking international law. My view is that to leave Hamas in place in Gaza will be a catastrophe for the Palestinian people.
Thank you very much for the link, Enkife. Let me get this up on screen so people can actually see the proof here. Civilian hostages will be freed if Israel stops bombardment of Gaza, senior Hamas leader says. Khaled Mishal would not be withdrawn on whether Hamas would stop hostage negotiations entirely if Israel presses ahead with the ground invasion of Gaza. Well, there you go. There has been statement said by a senior leader talking about having some kind of hostage negotiation if there was some kind of bombardment. So even after all of the stuff they've said before, Hamas have even said that they were happy to do some kind of hostage swap for a ceasefire.
This is an absolutely appalling situation, but can
we go back to the question on Keir Starmer, though?
Okay. I was just going to say, we have to think long term what's good for the Palestinian people as well as the Israeli people, and Hamas is not the answer to the question. In terms of Keir Starmer, ultimately he has to play to the national interest and not party interest. He's a serious politician. He aspires to be the Prime Minister. He has to think in...
Yeah, they should... fine, whatever. Okay. They should have to play towards the national interest rather than the party interest. Pray tell, Mr. Jackson, Lord Jackson no less, right? Pray tell, what was the last poll results in British support for a ceasefire amongst the whole population, right? Would you like to tell me how many people in this country that you're saying he has to represent want to see a ceasefire? Was it indeed over 70% support for a ceasefire? A supermajority, no less? Answer the fucking postcard, please.
In terms of what is in the national interest. And he's got to steer away from this internecine post-Corbynist approach that identitarian...
Of course. We cannot go a single segment, chat, without mentioning Jumbly Crumbles. The Jam Man's name has been mentioned again.
In politics means that he has to fall into line and attack Israel. I think he's taken a very moderate view. I think he is prepared to...
He's taken a more hardline view than Rishi Sunak.
Quite possibly. And I think you're right, Ian. I mean, you're an old cynic, of course, in politics. But, he Guilty. Knows full well that people are watching him now and they're gauging whether he looks like a man that can stand on the steps of number 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister. And it is a tough...
This fucking people! These absolute political dunderheads. This is a man is in the House of fucking Lords and he's here saying, well, actually, what doesn't really matter is the absolute morality of the things that he says or what he actually believes or any of his positions that he holds. What matters is whether or not he has the vibes, whether or not he has prime ministerial vibes. It's all that matters. It's the only thing that matters. It's the only piece of consequence of this whole thing is just whether he has PM vibes or not. These people are dunderheads. They're morons. And not only only are they morons, they're also moral vacuums. They're ethical voids. These people are revolting to me. They're disgusting. And the fact that I have to get ruled by these people with honours in the House of fucking Lords as legislators, absolutely makes me sick to my fucking stomach. Oh, there's only an ethnic cleansing going on. Really, though, have you thought about how Prime Ministerial Keir Starmer looks? Fuck off. Honestly, fuck off.
Test for him, and it will be a difficult few weeks, but I think he's made the right call.
Cindy?
Yeah, I agree with much of what Stuart's just said as well. When it comes to, Rachel, you raised a question of why Keir Starmer is doing this. I think it's not just the ghost of Corbyn, it's also the pressure of going into government possibly next year. The fact that this is the American position. Frankly, any prospective prime minister of this country needs to be looking at the American position on foreign policy issues, whether it's on Israel-Palestine or China or Russia, whatever it is. We might not like it, but frankly, that is the thing that we have to do.
No, there is no reason to take the America-centric position on these things. There's absolutely no reason to continue bouncing on Joe Biden's erect penis throughout this entire geopolitical conflict, right? Take a moral position. Take an ethical framework and apply it. Do not just take your marching orders from Saint Biden over in the White House. It's cuck behaviour. It's exactly what it is. It is cuck behaviour. And for these spectator journalists, apparently so pro-free speech, so pro-libertarian positions, pro having some kind of level to which people make their own decisions for themselves, coming onto here and saying that Keir Starmer should be indeed beholden to whatever the White House State Department wants to impose upon British foreign policy. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. To be fair, Brexit was taking back control. Brexit was all about having parliamentary sovereignty in this country. What it really meant was being more cucked to the Americans. It was all about being more cucked to the Americans. It's all what these people wanted. They wanted to merge British foreign policy with that of the American State Department, even more so than it was already, right? What happened last time, right? Cindy, do you want to tell us what happened last time? We were the lapdogs of the United States on foreign policy. Do you want to let us know what the disastrous consequences were, not just in Iraq, but in the entirety of that region? Last time we followed the marching orders of whoever was in the White House, led to 1 million dead fucking Iraqis, you absolute ghoul, you monster, right? Yet, right? When the House of Commons voted down military action in Syria, the American State Department explicitly said that they did not engage in airstrikes in Syria because they were following our lead at the time. So this idea that we have to be able to listen to American foreign policy all the time and we cannot dictate it for ourselves and let American follow us, nonsense. It's bullshit. The history tells you that it's untrue. This is nonsense. This is complete historical revisionism, and it's absolutely fucking psychotic. But then again, it is somebody from The Spectator, so I don't know why I'm surprised.
From the 51st state.
That's kind of a separate question, and let's maybe not open that kind of worms.
I mean, that worked really well over Iraq.
Well, you've opened the can of worms already, Cindy, and thank you, Rachel Shabi. Clearly, me and her are on a wavelength, right? We're on a level.
In Afghanistan, didn't it? That was a great idea.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm just saying that if you want to be a prime minister of the United Kingdom, you need to be on the same page as America, or at least.
No, you don't. No, you fucking don't. And the Syria example is proof that that's not the case, right? I've already disproven you immediately with one example from the last decade. Again, we're taking back control. We're taking back control, guys. No longer are we ruled over by unelected bureaucrats in the EU, in Brussels, right? We're just overruled by people that we didn't elect in America, right? At least we elect members of the European Parliament when we're a member of the EU.
As other Western developed countries. And actually, you know what? A lot of European countries have taken this strategy, have taken this position of not calling for a ceasefire, but of going to Israel.
Adults in the room chat. Just remember, this is exactly what the adults in the room looks like.
And saying to Netanyahu, behind the scenes, moderation, but no one is coming out to call for it. And I'm not talking about
the European Union did exactly that yesterday.
Sure, except but the European Union is also split on this question as well, by the way. So I just think it's, from a political perspective, set aside the kind of the moral and the values here, because I completely.
If your political position is not moral or ethical, get the fuck out of politics. I'm sorry. The whole point about politics is instituting policy that you believe makes the world more moral or more ethical. That's the whole point of getting into power and getting into office, into service in politics, is to ensure that you make the world a more moral place. If you're not doing that, what the fuck are you doing in politics other than to enrich your own bank account and the bank account of your friends? friends. I can't believe these people take these positions. The UK got pretty involved in Syria, but perhaps not to the same degree. But the thing is, I actually think that some intervention in Syria to defend Rojava from the Islamic State was 100% warranted, right? But that's not what the vote about airstrikes in Syria was. The airstrikes were specifically around indiscriminate bombing campaigns rather than on-the-ground assistance to the Syrian Democratic Forces. And I supported on-the-ground help to the Syrian Democratic Forces. I did not support the airstrikes. And I think it's important to understand that differential there, but I do get your point, CEO, that it's understandable that we did get some involvement in Syria, but I think it was justified involvement. There wasn't just bombing campaigns.
Cars down. I do not know enough about the situation, about the history involved here, to be able to opine and, give an authoritative view on it. But on the political analysis, that's why he's doing it. And I think
yeah, I don't understand any of these issues, but I bet I reckon something. This person is the editor of a widely read conservative magazine, folks. Welcome to the Adults in the Room chat. The political experts being invited onto panels going, well, I didn't know anything about this conflict. You've had time to research this. This has been going on for 17 days. You didn't think it might be worth, if you're going to get called on to opine upon this subject already, by widely watched radio networks or listened to in terms of LBC. You didn't think it was worth brushing up on your knowledge of this history at all? This is your job. Your job is being a journalist. Your job is reporting on these things, editing other people who are also reporting on these things. And you're like, well, I don't know about this. Then learn. You've had loads of time to learn. And yet you're here going, well, I guess I should talk about this thing during an ongoing political conflict. You're not even bothered to learn. And these are the people who are trying to inform other people on this subject as well. Heaven forfend.
I think it's a smart political strategy for them to be taking. You've already got a Labour Party which is confused on foreign policy. You look at China, it doesn't really seem to have a position on China that's that much different. You've got David Lammy, your foreign secretary, who might be coming in, who actually campaigned against Donald Trump coming to London a few years ago, and Trump might be president next year. So from Labour Party's perspective, if you want to be a prospective government in waiting, this is really what you have to do. And I think the thing that will move the dial is if the situation eases up, is if Washington, which it looks like it might be doing, eases up its own position and says, actually, Netanyahu, you've gone too far here. And, that might happen. And that's an absolute cop-out.
I think the most fascinating thing about this whole thing is that Israel has not launched a ground invasion yet. I emphasise yet. Now, why is that? It must be because the Americans in particular, plus Britain and other countries, have urged Netanyahu not to do it,
100%.
which is an indication of his weakness in his political position as Prime Minister of Israel, something which we wouldn't have said maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, I think it's two things, Ian, if I may say. I think one is the actual logistics of a ground war is going to be very, very difficult, and the Israelis have been burnt in Lebanon.
Yeah, but they've had plans for this for years.
They have had plans, but, street by street, ground fight is going to be very hard. The other thing is, politically, of course, they don't know what's going to happen. Even if they expunge the evil barbarians of Hamas out and start talking to the Palestinian representatives like Fatah, who may...
can we actually talk about the criminal barbarian of Netanyahu as well? Or are we only allowed to call out criminal barbarians if they're brown?
Or may not want to be the government of Gaza. They don't know where
they don't exist in Gaza, as I understand.
Well, they don't,
in
but
any meaningful way.
But the point is, no one quite knows what the end game, the end political objective will be, and that's why you do need Qatar, the Saudis, the Egyptians, and others. You have a multilateral approach to try and solve this crisis.
Wow. Absolute pieces of shit. But well done, Rachel Shabi. Not just for calling out Keir Starmer, but also humiliating Ian Dale live on air as well. I thought that was excellent. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.